All right, so hello and welcome everyone. I'm Jason Gumper from msdynamicsworld.com. Thanks for joining us for today's special event, I would call it. We're kicking off a series of updates from the Dynamics AX team that I'm really excited to be able to host for everyone here. Today we're joined by Ryan Battle. He's a Principal Program Manager at Microsoft and Senior Marketing Manager for AX, Winston Hait. They're both new presenters for us, and it's great to have them here for the first time. As we get the event started, please do know that we do invite you in the audience to ask Ryan and Winston your questions today. You can enter them into the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the main presentation window. Enter them anytime. They'll be taking some of them, if appropriate, during the event. They'll sort of play that by ear and leave time at the end as well to answer your questions. So without further delay, let me hand things off to Winston.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, and good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to whoever may be joining us on the call. We're really excited about being able to talk to you today a little bit about being able to take Dynamics AX to Azure, or taking it to the cloud. So it really had wanted to kind of step everyone through and talk a little bit about kind of the cloud priorities that companies are seeing, and kind of step you through how that's kind of led to what we've done in terms of developing AX for Azure, and kind of the success that we're having, customers that are doing it, and those tools that we provide you to be able to make that process as efficient, as cost-effective as possible. And then Ryan's actually going to step you through talking about some of the ways that we're doing these deployments and how our tools that we have with Lifecycle Services are helping to simplify that and really speed up bringing value, time to value for you. So in this first slide that I've got here, there's a lot of mega trends that are out there, and everyone keeps hearing about, cloud mobility, BI and analytics, and social media, and the impact that those are having on companies. But in this EPG relationship management survey that was done, they found that cloud was the highest. And I think more and more, the cloud is becoming a deployment option, is becoming an extension of companies' data centers that allows them to have this agility that everyone wants to have with the cloud, but allowing them to have that scalability as well. And I think that being able to have that with the cloud computing model that we have with Microsoft and the global footprint that we have and the amount of resources that we have in each of those data centers really is something that is driving a lot of uniqueness to what Microsoft's doing. In this IDC survey that they did, it really, I think, drives home how technology in companies is being viewed, and the fact that they said the trend is 70% of CIOs are going to embrace a cloud-first strategy by 2016. And I think it's really showing how the companies themselves, not just CIOs, but CFOs and CEOs are starting to look to the cloud to help them, give them a competitive advantage, and to help them be able to bring things to market faster, deliver better experiences, better connections amongst what their back-end operations are and their front-end operations, and really delivering a unique experience that you can't get with just an on-premises deployment. You can see here with the benefits, the speed, scale, and economics. There are great benefits that come with running in the cloud, and we've realized that. We heard customers talking to us about it. We heard customers saying we really wanted to be able to have this option, and is one of the reasons that we did it. This quote to me is one I think that's really important and really drives home a lot of the value from the cloud that's coming, that it's not just customers going to the cloud and staying there because of the cost savings. It's what gets them there, but it's when they get there and start to understand what the agility is, the additional services they can get, whether it's Azure Active Directory or the Azure IoT or Cortana Analytics or anything like that that can be plugged into those applications and be plugged in very, very easily. And I think that's something that really is helping companies to realize how they can transform their business and transform their operations. And this one I think is great just to look at what are the top ways that the cloud is driving this transformation. And the numbers that we see are pretty similar as you go into 2015 as well, from the estimates that we're seeing from the analysts that we talked to, the IDGs, the KPMGs, the Forresters, the Gartners. And I think it's really, again, cost is the main reason that companies are going there. But you start to see all these different advantages that you get. And especially, I think, for a lot of our customers, and I'll get to that in a little bit of what some of them have done, even starting with development and test. You may not want to run your production in Azure. That's okay. We provide the one hybrid model out there in the market that allows you to do dev and test on Azure, and you can then choose where you want to run your production. Do you want to run it on premises? Do you want to run it in one of our data centers? And being able to give you that flexibility that says, you know what you want to do today, but we give you that option to plan for and kind of target where you may want to be in 5 years, and we're already there to support you with that. And kind of there's three main areas that we get into that we see with the cloud that we think is really key in terms of kind of driving home what the opportunities are there for customers as they're looking at taking AX to the cloud. First is streamlining your infrastructure. So I talked about being able to do dev test, being able to do training. We have one customer in the UK that actually had wanted to do some training for their organization. They went in, spun up a training environment for 2 weeks, only paid for the compute time and the storage they needed for those 2 weeks, and then they spun it down, and they didn't have to pay a dime after it. And so that flexibility the cloud gives, I think, is really great to be able to help on supporting the business, even with disaster recovery in terms of all the different complexities that you can put in there, from basic, just copying data over to having a complete mirrored, synchronized copy that has a failover capability that can continue your operations almost seamlessly. There's just so much flexibility you get there with that. Then you move on to a mobile workforce. Microsoft Intune, the Azure Backbone for mobility, all of those together really help simplify being able to support BYOD and being able to come in and deliver those services as quickly and as seamlessly as possible, as well as cost efficiently as well. And the way that it also helps in terms of delivering that experience, in terms of customer interactions, the self-service capabilities you can get, both customers or employees, and then the insights they can get, being able to deliver that information to those employees when they need it, wherever they are. And then intelligent operations. And I think this is an area that's really getting a lot of interest from a lot of companies. You've got machine learning, you've got the Internet of Things, you get Power BI from Microsoft, that near real-time analytic view you can get into your operations, being able to take those, pin them to dashboards that you have, being able to understand and see at a glance on no matter what device you have, to be able to see what's going on with your operations and delivering that, whether it's on the corporate side, whether it's on a field sales side, whether it's in the operations in a retail store, your manufacturing facility, warehouse. All of these capabilities really, I think, drive a great value of the cloud, and is what we've been talking with customers about and what they've wanted us to really focus on in terms of what we've been able to enable for them. So as we think about Dynamics on Azure, and we think about kind of three main areas of the advantages that you're going to get from running AX on Azure, the first one is rationalizing your IT investments. It's just the pure play of the cloud. It's a compute-based, or a usage-based, I should say, system. You only pay for what you use. So if you want to start out and do dev test, and you want to be able to just spin that up for, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, versus the cost that you're going to be paying to do that yourselves in just your own development environment, you can see costs that are as much as 90% less for what you're going to do just for development and test. You start to then rationalize what you can do across other areas of your organization, the testing environments I just talked about, all these different areas that you can really leverage the power of the cloud. Realizing business value fast. Again, fast deployments. Ryan's going to go into a lot of detail about this, what we're able to do to get you up and going as quickly as possible, what you're going to be able to do to not only get up and going, but then develop and bring to market those new features and those new functionality you want. And all of that's ultimately helping you drive business impact, whether it's helping you to acquire new organizations, whether it's helping you to expand your operations wherever you are, whether it's domestically or globally, and being able to give you that flexibility to say, wherever you want to go, we can be there to support you in over 140 countries. And I think this rapid business growth and transformation are areas that continuously we're hearing from companies why they like Azure and why they like being able to put AX on Azure. Just to give you an idea of some of the companies that we're working with, and I think it's really important to see some of these companies and what they're doing and to understand, Conagra Foods, they're running operations over in China. Pandora's in Europe. Lotus, of course, is in the UK and all over the Europe. Flight Center's in Australia. JJ Food Service in Europe. These are all companies that are using the Microsoft Cloud and being able to use AX and Azure to help drive what they're doing. We've even got other companies like Integrated Dental Holdings in the UK, Allegion here in the United States, all that are getting ready to go live on Azure. Pet Supplies Plus I've got a few slides I'm going to talk with you about that, just to kind of step you through what their journey was with the cloud. In Kodak Alaris is even going to be going live this month. So there's a lot of stuff that we're doing, a lot that we're working with to really help deliver what the value is and being able to support customers with what they want to do. So I talked about Pet Supplies Plus. I just wanted to step through kind of a brief case study, if you will, kind of looking at what they've done and why they went to the cloud. So they're a retail pet food chain here in the United States. They have more than 300 stores in 24 states, and they're growing at a pretty good clip. And the industry itself is a rather large one. We didn't realize, but it's over $58 billion a year for pet supplies. So it's a company that has been around since 1988. And over time, they had developed disparate systems. They kept bringing in new applications. And they got to the point where a lot of our customers are, where they're going, we just have no version of the truth. We've got data in 5, 6, 7, 10 different systems. A lot of times it has to be hand entered. So there's a possibility of having errors there. The reporting then is so disjointed and difficult to do because it can take you a month just to get your month-end reports done because there's so much data you're having to go through, so much rationalization you're having to do across these different reports that it becomes really difficult. And without a core system in place, to simplify and centralize it, and be very, very difficult to do it. And then the whole point with legacy systems too, over time you develop, you do customizations, and before long the system is so customized it's not even reminiscent of the original system. And so it can start to lead to support issues, extensibility issues. You need something that's going to be able to help you handle that. So just a quick timeline of what Pet Supplies went through for this. I think the third bullet on here was one that was really interesting to us. They had signed with us in June of 2014, so June of last year. In July, we were able to spin up 3 environments for them on Azure of AX for them to take a look at. They were ecstatic. Within 30 days of signing the contract, they actually could look at the product, take a look at what they wanted to do, and be able to start looking at what our requirements gathering and get prepared for that whole process. As you can see, from that point forward, from the gap analysis starting in August, the deployment went pretty much the same as it did with any type of ERP implementation. It went pretty quick. They started in September. They went live last month. So they went live in 13 months. And that included all their development, all their dev test, and they are running a full production on Azure. They're going to be rolling it out initially to their corporate offices and some sample stores to do the testing, and then once they lock and load, they're going to start rapid-fire deployment across all 300 plus of their stores to be able to get it out. Probably, I'm not sure they're going to make it before the end of this year, but they'll definitely be doing it in 2016. And I think one of the things, too, and as you can see what they're supporting, and I think one of the things that's great on here is that you've got over 2,500 licensed devices. You're supporting point of sale in 300 retail outlets. You can see there's over 800 POS terminals. It's also going to be supporting 6 million transactions per day. And I think this is something that's really important because a lot of customers come to us and say, we've got a pretty high volume transaction system that we have. Can Azure support it? Absolutely. Absolutely. We're doing 6 million transaction lines per day just with the D series of VMs, D as in David. There's a G series, G as in George, that's out there that they're not even using. So and that is going beyond in scale. The G series is the largest publicly available VMs in the marketplace for any cloud provider. So we have room to grow and support whatever your operations are going to be. And then one of the other questions is, great, we've decided that we want to be able to do AX on Azure, but what can Microsoft do to help us do that? And that's something we actually came up with, which was Lifecycle Services. And a lot of people ask what it is. Well, it's application lifecycle management for AX. And what it's doing is it's helping you go from your design phases, figuring out what your discovery is going to be, figuring out what business processes you want to do, helping to then do the development of your customizations, looking at how we can help you move that forward and then bring it onto a live operation and then have continuous life experience after that. And the three main things that we see that Lifecycle Services brings is it gives you that agility to deploy quickly, help make sure that you're finding answers to problems quickly, being able to deliver a lot of automation and best practices to you to help you stay on time and on budget. And because of the way that Lifecycle Services is developed, is that it's a shared workspace between customers and partners. And all of the members of the project see everything. So the CEO can go in and very easy and very quickly see in a snapshot what's going on with the project. Where are we in terms of the deployment? There's the methodology there. You can see step by step what's supposed to be going on and exactly where the deployment is in that entire methodology. And the fact that we've been working with customers and Lifecycle Services is a cloud-based service. So what we can do is take those learnings that we're getting, those understandings of how we can help increase quality and help increase performance, and we can roll that back into the product. And because Lifecycle Services updates every month, we're getting all that learning back out to the world as quickly as we possibly can. So it's really topical. The information is really fresh. You don't have to worry about downloading anything on-prem. Everything runs in the cloud. So when it's updated for everyone globally. And as we talked about, as I mentioned before about automation and things, predictable outcomes is what we want you to have. We want you to know and have that reliability that you're going to have predictable and repeatable success with your deployments of AX. So not are you just going to have success in deploying it for your maybe corporate offices or for a manufacturing facility, but you can go to other manufacturing facilities you may have or other retail outlets and be able to deploy those systems that you need and know exactly how long is it going to take, what's required, what type of personnel, what type of support you need to be able to get that done without having to worry about it. And then also how you can use the intelligent cloud to be able to help do this and help eliminate a lot of the operations that are out there to simplify it and bring some consistency and a high quality bar to what you're doing. And we've seen a lot of momentum in terms of what our customers have been doing with LCS and with AX on Azure. We talked about the discover, define, develop, and operate phases. Those are the phases I talked about are kind of the main phases of the application lifecycle. The one thing that you'll see in the bottom right corner, the yellow circle, is we've now deployed over 19,000 VMs of AX on Azure. That's not a misprint. There's actually a comma in there. It's 19,000. And we have seen an explosion in the deployment since the introduction of premium storage back in March, which we've been waiting for to provide a consistent and reliable experience for any size organization, any size deployment that's running on Azure. And I think the other thing, too, that you see here, to the left of it, the 40-plus languages, we are going to be introducing native support for over 40 languages of LCS. This is an area that's been really important that we've wanted to focus on to help drive adoption both in the Asia-Pacific region as well as Latin America, and really being able to help support what our customers want. And then on the bottom left, that LCS solutions, we have over 70 partner solutions that are being developed that are designed to kind of package up an industry solution and help you to deploy it along with business processes and sample data and everything else you need to get up and going even faster. And so we're really trying to work with a lot of what our customers are doing to do that. So after giving an introduction to kind of AX on Azure and talking about Lifecycle Services, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Ryan and let him kind of walk you through a little bit of deployments and how we're doing it and give you a lot more detail on that. Ryan? Sure. And
share my screen. I think you can see now.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I'm going to jump into the where, how, and what of what Winston was introducing. First by saying where. So Microsoft, as you know, has been making huge investments in infrastructure around the world to deliver Azure, which is our cloud offering, cloud infrastructure for us to build AX on top of, and for the general community to build their own applications and deliver those to the cloud, to common cloud OS, if you will. What you can see here is the 20 regions that are presently available. We had 16, I think, around this time last year. Now we're at 20. Some of these are sovereign data centers, which means they're sort of walled gardens of Azure. They're actually independent instances of Azure that are not available to the public. But inside of them, it's all Azure as well. There's portals and generally all the services that are available to public. There's usually some delay, and I wouldn't call it delay. There's just, when new hardware or new offerings get introduced, they sort of roll out across the world. As you're seeing news bulletins of new features, just look at the locations that's available in, and so you're aware and you plan accordingly if you're interested in those. But all of these are, staffed 24/7, people with card keys and background checks and following a bunch of very common and important compliance, industry compliance. We're growing compute about 2 times and storage about 2 times every 6 months. And as Winston mentioned, we have these G series VMs, which are the biggest for cloud offerings. But also we've introduced recently Series D version 2, which offers for AX, we're seeing about 30 to 35% performance increase for that series of VMs, and that series of VMs is now the price of what the D Series 1 VMs used to be. So you can see we're introducing new and better capabilities all the time, and the price points aren't necessarily going up. You'll expect to see those actually decrease over time as well. So giant footprint. Great opportunities to have the AX instances that we deploy local to your users or your customers. So let's jump into the how. You may be familiar with the Azure Portal. In the Azure Portal, the initial V1 Azure Portal, it was focused on discrete sort of deployments of storage or network or VMs. In the new Azure Portal, you're starting to see the deployment of more complex applications like SQL Always On or SharePoint Web Forms, and also Azure introducing declarative language for deploying complex business applications that have multiple different Azure resources, and then grouping them all together into sort of a resource group. Now, Lifecycle Services has a service that has a declarative language for deploying complex applications as well. This was built on top of Azure's V1 infrastructure. And as you can see around the corners here, we have Azure, which RDFE stands for their V1 platform. ARM stands for their V2 platform. They have a global gallery of VMs that essentially these VMs are replicated around the world into all the storage stamps, so you can get access to VMs very quickly. And then we have O365 Commerce and Azure Active Directory, all of these things that we build on top of. The next level of detail in here is we have a provisioning system. We have our own global storage for cases where we can't put something in the gallery. And then we have some other capabilities around keeping track of and managing for you, where all of the VMs that are associated with a particular deployment, that they are indeed yours and they're not somebody else's. And then we have, and this is the meat of the matter, we have our deployment service and a workflow engine. Now, the deployment service is where we register topologies. We register, we basically declare in an XML format, what the Azure infrastructure is that needs to be consumed by this AX instance, or the CRM instance, for that matter. And then also within that are various scripts that describe the software deployment on top of that infrastructure. So on top of that comes LCS, and then our data model that gives LCS access, and then we have a bunch of tooling that allows for us to do automation and testing to make sure that we're giving that repeatability that Winston was mentioning. So then we plug in here some topology XMLs, and just think of them as XML files that describe resources. And then also coming along with this are build VHDs, which have AX setup on them or various tools on them that we attach to each VM. And then also prereq VHDs, which have, you're familiar with AX, there's a fair amount of prerequisite software that needs to be present when you run AX. And what we do is we create our own prereq VHDs and register those in either our global storage or in Azure storage. So for the case where they go into Azure storage, this means that when you deploy, say, to South Asia, those VMs that you need to deploy into your subscription, they're right there. They're quickly, rapidly accessible. We can spin them up. We don't have to copy them across the world as we did, well, I would say about 8 months ago. That's what we were doing. But then we, partnered with Azure to make that a lot quicker. So after we place those VHDs into storage, we then register the scripts with our workflow engine so that when the infrastructure gets spun up, then we start executing the software install across the VMs that were spun up. And then as you come into LCS and you request the deployment of, say, a test topology, we execute that topology on your behalf to your subscription, and then all of these resources get deployed into your subscription per the specification that you gave through LCS, and I'll show you that in a minute. So that's sort of the how of what we deliver these topologies and these offerings to you. So going into R3 specifically, Winston touched on this also, we have essentially 4 scenarios. We have demo scenarios that talk about or that enable you to spin up a single VM that's got AX in a box essentially, and you can do various customizations on that for a customer or for an industry. Present that as part of your pre-sales motion or your an engagement. If you're an ISV, you're selling perhaps a new capability for manufacturing, and then you can stop these VMs and you reuse them if you like, over and over again, rather than spinning them up again and recustomizing them. When you stop them, you're not paying for them, so that's a great benefit to expedite your business. So then we have develop, and this is more about team development, where each individual engineer could have their own, again, AX in a box, development VM with Visual Studio on it, configure the Visual Studio online. You could dedicate one of these VMs to be a build VM, and you can choose whether to have the AX database associated with each developer be on that box, consuming resources on that box, or externalized into a shared SQL server where all the developers are essentially sharing one larger SQL server, and each of them have their databases on that. Then you can manage that database centrally rather than worrying about backup and restore perhaps on the developer's box. And then we go into test. This is one of the most popular offerings, and lets you get into using Azure for functional and UAT testing, and then sort of if you haven't formed an opinion on whether you want to deploy your production in Azure or not, you're getting experience. IT is getting experience using Azure, and you can start forming some opinions about what you want to do for production. Then we get into production, and it's a much larger topology. I'll go into details in a second, but essentially, think high availability, think always on, think production ready. So here's what a R3 topology, high availability topology looks like from the infrastructure level. You can see on the left we have the client, browsers, VMs, etc. Then we have Azure Traffic Manager, which at this point doesn't come into play because we haven't yet implemented our site recovery capabilities, which we're essentially riding on the back of the Azure Site Recovery team, who's building the capabilities to do from one Azure data center to another to have a disaster recovery instance in that other data center. And then if there is an incident either in that data center or around that data center that wants you to, that forces you to shift access to the other instance, then the Traffic Manager enables that shift to be much more seamless. Behind that we have Azure Load Balancers, and these essentially do the job of routing to the various front ends and watching for any VMs being down and not routing users to down VMs. Below that we have Azure Active Directory, and then directory synchronization from your corporate network Active Directory to Azure Active Directory. Now, natively in an R3 high availability topology or any R3 topology, Azure Active Directory is not enabled. Now, it could be enabled for something like EP, or if you have other apps that you've built and you want to employ Azure Active Directory, you can, and it's available to you in that fashion. Then once you get inside of the box here, this is all of the infrastructure that we're deploying for R3. You can see we have a remote desktop tier, which again has remote desktop, remote web app. Behind that are our client tier, okay, and it's 2 to n VMs. So based on the size of your deployment, you can choose the proper sizing for those. Then we have client tier, and then we have Enterprise Portal. We have our AOS tier. Now AOS could be in a varying mode, so you would end up splitting out, say, batch or interactive. Or integration, whichever you desire. And then we have reporting and analytics. Behind that is a SQL Always On cluster. This is 2 nodes, and we enable premium storage for that deployment. So this is running on our high IOPS backend, so that to deliver on the performance that is necessary for AX. Now, we do not recommend at all attempting to deploy a production environment on non-premium storage. Then we have some storage blobs down here. This is where the VMs get backed if you will, and then we have other artifacts down here. So that's the picture of what R3 is today. Now, we're about to publish a guide on using Azure Remote App rather than the RDS client tier that we deploy. Now, what you saw there was a bunch of infrastructure disappearing from your box and moving outside of your box into being operated by Azure. So what this means is we created a client Azure Remote App enabled image that we presently have registered in the gallery, but we're working with the Azure Remote App team to have in their gallery. So you can, when you're configuring Remote App, you can simply inside of their gallery choose the AX client image that you want. And then you can set various thresholds of scale for it. And what it'll do for you is it'll scale up that front end, the client front end, if you will, up and down on your behalf based on the utilization, and sort of take that need to manage those two tiers, the RDS and the client tier, outside of your control, but essentially they're providing that to you as a service. Everything behind it stays the same. Now, one other thing we're working on is Azure recently announced Domain Services, which is essentially letting you join VM resources, create resource domains in Azure Active Directory, rather than having individual Active Directory instances in your subscription. So as we had in the prior picture here, you can see we have Active Directory in your topology. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not psyched about having to manage Active Directories in the cloud. I would just assume somebody do that for me, and that's what Domain Services is intended to do. Not only does it take away, operating expense associated with the AD, but also sort of reduces the cost of running those, and also eases the management of that, because it's now comfortably inside of Azure Active Directory, where you may be managing your O365 offering already. So what you can see happening here with R3 is, we started out, hey, we have to deploy everything. Azure doesn't have capabilities for us to uptake and turn, this, you run everything offering into a, Azure starts to, sort of put some of this on their own shoulders and operate it for you. And you engage it as a sort of a SaaS-like offering. One more thing that we are working with the SQL Azure team on is this SQL Server always-on cluster is something that the Dynamics team built, meaning we didn't build the always-on technology, but we built the deployment architecture around deploying AD, deploying the SQL servers, deploying the witness server, and optimizing that for high IOPS, meaning we allow you to define the number of disks, the size of the disks, etc., to get the best performance out of that system. The SQL Server team also has a high availability always-on offering through the portal, but they do not do all of these optimizations that are required for AX. But we've been working with them to actually bring those things into their offering, so that we could say, hey, we're not the SQL experts, you're the SQL experts. We want to use your service to deploy this, and then wire that up to an AX instance. So essentially what again, you see our responsibility in the deployment of the system continues to be reduced, and we continue to gain leverage across Azure for, who's the expert at Remote App? Well, the Remote App team is. Well, they're building a service, let's leverage them. SQL Server, same thing. Domain services, same thing. Now, what we'll focus on and continue to focus on is the application and making that the best and strongest application offering we can. So just talking a little bit about what is high availability in what we deploy and what is fault tolerant. Our client and RDS tier, even if we go to Remote App, that's highly available. The AOS tier uses the Azure Internal Load Balancer, so it's highly available. SQL Always On, likewise. Now, reporting and Enterprise Portal, these are deployed as fault tolerant, but there is some extra work that needs to be done in order to make them highly available, and we provide prescriptive guidance on the reporting services, and we have a white paper coming soon for Enterprise Portal. So let me jump over to show you what R3 looks like in LCS as far as deployment goes. Winston mentioned, a project and having various personas be able to see the status of a project. And in here, I have a development topology with one dev VM. I have a high availability production topology, and this has the SQL servers, we have AOS servers, we have the BI analytics, client, remote desktop, and we've enabled remote web app, so you can gain access to the client through remote web app. Now you can choose to do remote desktop if you want, but the experience for the user is far superior with web app. And then we have a test topology, which is a scaled down version of the production, so you can do UAT and functional testing. So if we go into the deployment experience, sorry, it timed out. Presented to you are the various scenarios we support. Demo, we have RTM, CU8, CU9, and then under dev test, we have, again, develop with external SQL, test, and then several retail test offerings. And then we'll dig in a little bit more into the high availability. So let's go into here. And first off, what you'll see is, the number of instances for each of the tiers, and then the size of the VMs associated with them. Now, what I'm not showing you is in LCS, there's profile usage and infrastructure estimation. So if you're planning for a production deployment and you go through those that process and that methodology to size your system according to your needs. Once you're in infrastructure estimation and you save that, that would show up here as a estimation, and you could click the estimation and it would basically fill in all of these instances and sizes to match sort of that recommendation. But we're doing it manual, so let's see what we have available here. You can see the DV2 options, but even with that increased performance, we would recommend you not use it for SQL. What we have down here is the premium tier. Sorry. And you can see the G series premium and the DS series premium. These automatically, through our system, get assigned into premium storage. So this is where you get that highest performance. I'll just choose that for grins. And you can, I'm just showing an example of the various tiers and how many VMs you could choose. We default EP to 0 in case many people don't need EP, so we've chose not to place that there. Let's run it. And we can look at the SQL Server. So for SQL Server, we offer either our custom image, which is if you deploy this environment with our custom image, then you have to provide the license, the Enterprise SQL license. Now, if you choose not to do that and use the gallery image, we pull this from the Azure Gallery, and then there's a consumption. You pay on consumption for this rather than having to provide the license. I believe in general the break even is 3 years, so it depends on how long you're planning to have this deployment in play. Now the next section is it allows you to define the number of disks that you want on each SQL VM. Now if you leave it blank, we'll just use the maximum number of disks that are available on the VM. Each VM supports a different number of disks from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 to 16. And then you can also specify how large each disk should be. Now, there's as you can imagine, you should spend some time in here really thinking about how much data you have and will have, and what your needs are there to make sure that you build out the highest performance and best scaled SQL solution that you can. We support the ability to join existing domains. So in the case where you've set up a VPN or express route from your corporate network to your Azure subscription, you could deploy your AD in that subscription and then target that AD with the deployment. So we would essentially, use your domain to all of these service accounts associated with AX would have to be in your AD, and in the documentation you have to pre-create them. But then you add them here, and then we use them when we deploy, so that all of the services are now associated with your domain. We support 3 versions. We always default to the most current. So if you're running on an older version, older CU, you would want to go in here and say downgrade it. Downgrade is not the right word. You would want to switch it to what you're running on. And then for the IT guys, we have naming, right? So if you have a standard for naming, we allow you to stay with that. Choosing remote app or remote desktop, and then joining virtual networks if you've set up a virtual network ahead of time. So that's how you deploy. Now let's just quickly take a look at some of the things you can do to an environment after it's deployed. So we have deallocate, which is essentially the first phase of a delete process. If you want to delete all of the artifacts associated with this deployment, from the VMs to what is in the storage account for this, to the networks, to the everything, you can click deallocate. It'll go through and essentially shut down everything, and then you'll have to come back and delete it. Now, if by mistake you click deallocate, well, you can always recover from a deallocate, but you can't recover from a delete. So we have 2 steps in there to ensure that you really wanted to delete that topology. We also have edit, which gives you the ability to add VMs to the existing topology. So if you need more AOSs, you can add them. If you need more BI client, etc., you can add them. What this does is it deploys them, but it will not automatically add them into the load balancer, add them into the production instance, because just deploying them is not enough. You need to have your solution, your application installed on them. You might have to do some servicing of that VM before you add it to the rotation. So we provide you the ability to spin up that VM, but you still have to do the last mile to get it ready for production. Then we do provide some scripts to help you facilitate adding them into the load balancer. Some tiers you can't scale out, like the SQL tier. We don't provide that option yet. We are looking to the SQL team when they provide us that new SQL Always On capability to give us the ability to add more VMs there. And one other thing that people have given us feedback is that today, or not today, yesterday, a project could be only tied to one and only one subscription and region. Well, what we chose to do was to give you the ability to add other regions. So let me just grab this subscription and say I want to deploy to US East. And what this should do is give me the option to choose US East. So now I've created a connector to US East for the subscription, and when I go to deploy, now I can make a choice. I can say I want to deploy this to US West or US East. So yeah, that took us a little bit to get that done, but we're really happy we did. So that's the highlights on the deployment experience. Let me do a time check. 52. So let me just quickly run through what's coming in AX7. AX7 is web-based, so you're not going to have the Win32 client. That is essentially stored on the server, so we still have to do session management. So just flying through here, we have some O365 integration for Power BI and Exchange and SharePoint. A lot of this infrastructure looks very similar to what it did for AX7. We have Azure App Gateway, which is our level 7 session management solution provided by Azure. Then we have AOS's BI tier, and then we have optional retail instances for deploying retail around the world, but then backhauling it to the headquarters, which is on the AOS tier. You have Active Directory instances, but again, as we look towards domain services, we look to have that externalized so you don't have to manage it. And then let's just quickly jump over to here. So here I have a AX7 instance deployed. Let me relog in real quick. So this is a small segmentation. I think we have one AOS and one BIVM. So not very big, but as you can see, once it's deployed, you can get access to the client. You should get access to the client. Oh, there you go. Yeah, I did this on lower end hardware, so don't hold me to that experience. Should be a little bit quicker. But I was deploying it mostly as a deployment test. But as you can see, this is this is the current base view of an AX implementation. Nothing's customized. This is the whole shoot match. So jumping back over to here, one thing that we've gotten feedback on is around cost. So what we're looking to do is where you saw the options to edit and deallocate. I skimmed over stop, but you can stop a whole topology and stop paying for the VMs when they're stopped, and you can start. But really, what you may want to do is have the ability to set a schedule on certain topologies just to stop and start them at certain times, and not pay overnight or pay on the weekends when people may not be working. So this is sort of our initial thinking around allowing for a topology to be scheduled for stop and start. So I think with that, we should take some questions.
Well, Ryan, this is Winston. I've actually been looking at and trying to respond to some of the questions, but I think there's some in the Q&A that would be good to take a look at if you want. I answered the one from Wayne. And there's one from Kevin Castleman. What is hybrid network support? Is that a connection to an on-premise network?
Yes. So using this AX7 as reference, you have your VNet in your Azure subscription, and this is where your VMs are deployed. Then on the edge of that, you have what essentially is a gateway that gets created as part of your VPN or express route setup from on-prem. So this is your on-prem. So essentially your Azure VNet and your corporate network sort of become connected, right? You become one. And that's when I talked about how you deploy an AD and then you join your deployment to that AD. You would have to have this set up in order to have that that domain, that AD domain that is in the VNet, either as part of this forest or as a trust relationship to that, and that would happen over technically what hybrid means. It's sort of a cross between your a cloud and on-prem solution. I'm trying to find the window so I can see the questions. I'm not sure where I lost it. So Winston, if you could, if you still are seeing questions, go ahead and fire.
Sure.
Okay. How do you maintain configuration across VM versions for testing?
How do you maintain configuration across VMs for testing? Today, in R3, essentially what we do is we deploy the infrastructure for you. Then you still have to do the same sort of things you did in on-prem to get your solutions deployed across them. So you would have to build scripts, or you probably have them on-prem or for other things that help you deploy your applications onto the VMs that have been deployed. Now that's the R3 story. For AX7, we are investing much more in the ability to port your code and configuration across any system. So if you're doing development and you create a build, to be able to go into LCS, select those artifacts, select your deployment, and deploy them. Once deployed, likewise, if you do some updates, you would be able to say, okay, take these updates and target that system with these updates, and then automation would take care of doing that. Now, obviously, it gets a lot more complex when you start talking about doing that onto a production environment, and we are definitely spending time making sure that whatever we provide as an offering there really nails it to ensure that your business is not negatively impacted. So R3 sort of same as what is done today. AX7 turning up the knob on automation and ease of use for moving those artifacts around.
And I've got one other one. If you want to put yourself on mute, it's got a little bit of text to go with it, but I think it's a good one to ask. For a dev AX deployment with multiple AOSs, where would we want to use a single shared SQL Server instance, but dedicated databases for each developer there, so parallel checkout would be possible in version control? Is that a possible scenario via LCS?
I would probably need to talk to that person to understand more what is being asked. So if the whole checkout of using VSO, there's nothing in LCS per se that is going to help with that. That's all Visual Studio Online, and the developers, in his Visual Studio on his desktop, integrating with that Visual Studio Online instance. Whatever the tooling that provides, it would be available. But beyond that, I'm not sure what the question is.
I think just kind of a quick comment on it too. Just remember, LCS is helping and is really focused on deploying AX and in deploying these environments. We really try to leverage, as Ryan's mentioned a few times, the technology that other Microsoft capabilities or other Microsoft products have. So in terms of a question specific to VSO, it's more of a VSO-based question than I think an LCS-based question. And then the last question, because I know we're at the top of the hour, is the scheduling in LCS for Azure environments available now?
The scheduling for COGS management, no. This is something that's forward-looking. We have a design, we have it in our backlog. We know what we would do for wave one, and that's kind of what we showed. Now it's just a matter of getting that onto the schedule. We do provide a set of runbooks on TechNet. If you search runbooks AX, you'll find the runbooks that we provide, and you can plug those into your Azure subscription, and then based on your deployment, alter the variables in those runbooks and set the schedule with those, and it will essentially take it will do that work for you. The challenge with that, of course, is that it's not integrated with LCS, and we're fully aware of that, and that's why we have the features coming. But there are some tools out there to help you with that management today, and that's why we provided them.
And I think just one last comment, then I'll hand it back to kind of close out. Patrick McLaughlin had asked a really good question. Does Microsoft plan on providing a training program for deploying AX in Azure? Actually, what I had done as a response, I don't know if everyone's seen the answer I sent out. There's a great TechNet article that Ryan actually works to build content into to keep up to date with whatever the current features and functionality is with deploying AX on Azure. I think that is the absolute best place to go. It is the most up to date, the most current with what's available out there, and I think is an absolutely fantastic resource guide for anyone who's looking to do this. There's a lot of effort that he's put into getting as much content in there as we can and taking feedback from customers and then updating it or providing more details for it. So with that, I'd say, Jason, I'll hand it back to you. Jason, are you there?
Sorry, Winston, I was on mute, didn't realize it. Yeah, well, thanks again for taking so much time to answer so many questions for the audience there. A lot of questions coming in, and some really good ones, including the ones you answered on through text as well. We have recorded today's event.
If there are questions that we didn't get to, is there a way to get them and a way to follow up?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone still has a question that hasn't been answered, we do have the queue captured here for a couple that we didn't get to. Please enter your questions before you leave today. We can capture those. We can send them on to Ryan and Winston to get further answers on. Perhaps we can follow up in an email, or we can follow up with an article on MS Dynamics World to kind of summarize more of those topics. So please do enter any other questions we haven't gotten to, and we'll leave the session open for a few minutes here. But with that, we are going to start closing out. Please look for the survey that should pop up after you leave today. We really appreciate any feedback you can offer. If you do see that, it only takes about 10 or 20 seconds to do. We did record today's event. We'll be making that available soon. Well, Ryan, Winston, thanks to both of you for taking the time to do this today.
Oh, thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun for us, and hopefully we can have you back again sometime soon. So
look forward to it.
Awesome. With that, I will say have a great day, and thanks for joining us. And that concludes the event.
Thanks
everyone.